right, welcome back to the Yonder Boys. Our good friend and often co-host Chet Parsons saw a recent post of ours in the social medias that said EVs are in the shitter. Chet, you mentioned that your feed is an up and down cycle. One day it's in the shitter, one day it's not. The reason that we brought this subject up online was because the New York Times is having a field day lately, both with their print edition and with their podcast, The Daily, talking about all the problems that are going on in the EV world.
I mean, give us the breakdown. What's your evaluation of that headline? What's the state of play? What's going on, Chip?
It's the same as it always is. It's a matter of hitting the market where it needs to be hit. And I think there's been a lot of reactionary move to push hard and from everywhere, from the president on down. We've seen this push. It's got to be BEV. It's got to be BEV. We've got to go battery electric. That's the push. I'm like, that's great. If you can do it, it's going to happen in a certain way. It's going to be premium luxury. It's going to start there and trickle down. It has to, just because the technology is expensive and we're not there yet. And I think that the realization right now is that these premium products, these expensive products, these niche products like a Hummer EV are very limited. There's not that many buyers for them. And the buyers that are there are not necessarily buying these things because they're electric and because they're doing great for the planet, because they might not even be. They're buying it as a hall pass. They say, I can get a great big truck, but it's acceptable now because it's electric. And there's only so many of those buyers. And if you take middle America, you take the average consumer in the United States, they need something to replace an inexpensive pickup truck. They need something to replace a reasonably priced crossover vehicle, and they need to not think about it. They need this to be a transition of normalcy. Even with the Prius back in the very first days of, I'm driving this and I want it. People weren't buying Camry hybrids, but they were buying Priuses because the Camry hybrid just looked like a Camry, and nobody wanted to say, "Oh, that's my Camry," and then have to explain it's a hybrid. They wanted people to know that they were doing good for the planet by driving a Prius. Same thing here is, you have people who want to appear that they're doing their part. And I said the other day, I think where you're getting your Rivian customers is, I think people coming out of Subarus, they want something that looks virtuous and looks green and adventurous, but they also really do kind of want the giant SUV, because who doesn't? Like, everybody wants to drive the big truck around, especially here in LA.
You exactly. You want the pass, the hall pass, as you put it to us, to get away with driving a large vehicle like that. And I have to say that Rivian is precisely positioning itself as the sort of the off-road adventure. And of course, I love the comparison to the Subaru, but that's precisely how they're doing it. And I'll be honest with you, that kind of gets my pulse up. I get excited by that. I like the idea of driving the EV out in the on the Forest Service roads out in the Pacific Northwest.
The question is, when does it go from those vehicles into the more middle mainstream? Now, Tesla's the only one that's done this super successfully with the Model 3 and the Model Y, and they keep bringing the price down where it's more and more affordable. But at the same time, is Tesla getting, as a brand and as a model, a little long in the tooth? Are they getting to the point where they're reaching saturation of people who want to look like a Tesla driver?
Do we need to call out the elephant in the room that was sort of...
While, Chet, you've been around the block, and yet, listeners, not one of us drives an EV. Why is that?
We have to come clean. We got to come clean on that, on our dirty secret.
Dirty.
Except for Chet. Chet's the only one who's like kind of put his money where his mouth is recently, but for all very, very different reasons. And so that does open the conversation about why, what's the next, how do you get to the next car? How do you get to that purchase? But let's at least give Chet a little bit of credit. Do you want to give us the news, Chet?
I've made the tiniest of efforts, almost as tiny as I can. So I'm not fully embarrassed here. I put a deposit on a Volvo EX30. It's a year away. It may be, there's time, and it may or may not actually happen, but I'm ready to jump out there, with the caveats of, it's challenging for me. My hang up, as you guys know, is that I can't charge at home unless I spend a pretty significant amount of money to upgrade this charming old bungalow to have enough power to support a level 2 charger.
That's probably me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that's been my biggest holdup. My wife has said the same thing. She's like, we can't charge at home. We don't want to have an EV in the driveway. The same challenges that hit so many consumers hit me. I am an average consumer in a certain window of my demographic.
There are real pocketbook issues in terms of what you can afford and the
Yeah.
risk that you're willing to take on. This is something that came up that Jeffrey pointed out about people's sort of reluctance, at least at this point of calendar year 2023, to make the commitment to an EV. And for Jeffrey, you're talking about anxiety about the grid, about the ability to power up, and yes, range anxiety. Range is definitely a thing for me where I'm living in, right here in the middle of America. And I think that it brings up this, to me, the stepping stone that we talked about are hybrid electrics. The easier sell, is that the easier stepping stone to add a lower emissions vehicle to your garage. But Jeffrey, you had a perspective on that I think was meaningful, because I think you kind of cut right down the middle of that sort of American family demographic.
That's where our reluctance to get an EV comes in, is we are a one-car family, and until I mean, the idea is that if the shit ever hit the fan, we wouldn't be able to necessarily get away with a electric car, and that's our only option. But what we were talking about before, that I think is a realistic option for a lot of Americans, all you Americans with your 2 and 3 car garages, all of you, one of those cars could be an EV very easily, and it could get you to and from the grocery store,
or a hybrid.
Or a hybrid. And you keep your gas car, you keep your Chevy Tahoe. That's for your road trips. That's for Armageddon. But the EV is for every single day of our lives. Can I say
it's a different message to say add an EV than to replace your ICE car? I mean, I think that there's something intriguing there, and it'd be interesting to see if manufacturers can help with that stepping stone. But I wonder, Chet, to the extent that you're up to your ears in this stuff, what your perspective is on on the place of hybrid electrics at this stage. Again,
I think hybrids are going to see a renaissance, a resurgence. They just announced the National North American Car of the Year yesterday, and it's Prius, the new Prius. The new Prius looks good. Finally, it's a Toyota, so it's a good car, and loaded plug-in hybrid Prius is under $45,000. So you've got options out there. I think that's going to see a resurgence. Toyota's always been pushing for this. Ford's going to push for this, I think, now as well. You're going to see more new vehicles, more hybrid versions. The new Camry is only available as a hybrid. You're going to see that bounce back a little bit to bridge this gap. And in hindsight, it's probably what a lot of manufacturers should have been doing, instead of jumping on the EV bandwagon so whole hog and saying, let's take baby steps. Let's make some EVs, but let's make more hybrids. Let's figure out how to do this. Getting that messaging across to kind of our point of being here is getting that message across, explaining to the average consumer that they could have a hybrid version of their SUV.
And so maybe the consumer and the technology meet in the middle there, because that, it makes a lot of sense to me.
I challenge the three of us. One of the three of us this time next year should be in either a hybrid or an EV. We'll have this conversation again, December 1, 2024. One of the three of us.
If all three of us end up in an electric or a hybrid, we're going to have a celebration. It's going to have to be a party.
Well, wrap it up for us, Chet. What do you see in the new year now that Jeffrey's issued the challenge?
We talk about consumer mobility. It's going to happen. It needs to happen in commercial at a bigger scale. That's where the biggest environmental difference, I think, is going to happen, is on the commercial side. That's a hard road. It's part of my business. It's tricky. That's got to happen as well. It's a whole nother discussion. On the consumer side, it has to be this middle ground. We have to take a step back to take some steps forward. And it's, when we talk about demand is down for what's currently available. Demand is down for the stuff that you can buy today. And that's limited. As that market grows, the demand will continue to grow. As you have more options, as you have more infrastructure, that demand will come.
It's exciting. Well, great way to sort of button up our reunion. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that hopeful perspective at the end. It's what we all need. But happy holidays, enjoy, feast, and we will reconnect in the new year. But thanks again, Chet, for joining us.
Always happy to be here, guys. Good to catch up with you again.